SpaceX tanks. Now, Falcon 9 carries over 1.1 million pounds of propellant at liftoff. You can see her on the screen. And we burn off most of it in the first 8.5 minutes. Now, all of that propellant goes through the 9 engines on the first stage and the single engine on the second stage. Now, later in flight on the second stage video, you may notice the nozzle of the second stage engine is larger than those on the first stage engines. That's because the second stage engine only operates in the vacuum of space, while the first stage engines have to operate from sea level up to vacuum. So in the vacuum of space, a large nozzle allows the pressure of the Merlin engine to fully expand so that it matches that vacuum pressure when it leaves the nozzle. Now, if we tried to use that large nozzle on the first stage engines, it would be very inefficient until the last seconds of first stage flight when we do finally get to the vacuum of outer space. So we use a smaller nozzle on first stage engines, and that's a much better match for flying through the Earth's atmosphere on the way to space. Now, on the weather front at Cape Canaveral, we started with a 10% probability of violating launch weather requirements. We've been watching some showers on both sides of the launch complex, but nothing right now looks like it's going to interfere with launch. So we don't expect any weather holds as we continue the countdown. The weather conditions are also looking good for booster landing on our drone ship and for fairing recovery. So with that, the launch vehicle, the satellite, the weather, and the range are all good to go for a 10:58 p.m. Eastern Time liftoff from Space Launch Complex 40.
As I mentioned earlier, the Turksat 5B is a communication satellite that will provide broadband internet services and will be the most powerful of the Turksat satellite fleet. The Turksat 5B communication satellite will operate in Ku and Ka bands at the 42 degrees east longitude slot in geostationary orbit in order to provide service in a wide range of areas covering the Middle East, the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, the Mediterranean, Nigeria, various parts of Africa, and its immediate neighbors. Turksat 5B has high data transmission capacity in the Ka band and has a designed service life of over 35 years. Now, let's take a moment to learn more about what makes this communication satellite unique.
T-minus 4 minutes, 40 seconds and counting. And shortly, the transport erector will retract the strongback to the pre-launch position. That's about 2 degrees from the rocket. What we're waiting right now is to see the clamp arms open around the second stage, and that'll be followed by the hydraulic
Strongback
movement.
retract has started.
Okay, we've heard the call out there. The strongback retract has started. Seeing a lot of condensation as we're boiling off, or we're actually have the cold second stage liquid oxygen meeting that warm Florida air. But we probably can see the arms start to open. And then once the arms are open, the strongback will move about 2 degrees away. And then once we're at launch, ground hydraulics will move the strongback to a position about 45 degrees away. Now, first stage fuel loading is complete. We're currently waiting for first stage liquid oxygen loading to complete at about T-minus 3 minutes. Second stage will complete a minute after that. Now, 1 minute before liftoff, you're going to hear the announcement Falcon 9 is in startup. Now, this announcement means the rocket's first and second stage computers are now controlling the launch countdown on the Falcon 9. Now, at about T-minus 2 seconds, we'll light the 9 engines on the first stage. Once the engines are confirmed to be at full power, the flight computer on the second stage will command the ground hold downs to release the rocket right at T0.
Stage 1, lock load complete.
We've heard the call out. Stage 1 LOX load is complete. We're on time, coming up at T-minus 3 minutes and counting. Now, the satellite team is continuing to monitor the status and health of the Turksat 5B payload located inside the fairing on top of the second stage. And all the systems are go on the satellite. And the satellite did switch from ground power to its internal batteries at T-minus 16 minutes. Coming up on T-minus 2.5 minutes shortly. Everything continues to look good. We're still loading liquid oxygen on the second stage. Now, currently the range is green. The air and sea space, as well as the area around Complex 40, they're clear for launch. And on the weather front, as we talked a few minutes ago, the good news is we don't have any weather that looks like it's going to hold us. But if we did have a weather rule violated, we cannot stop and try to launch later. But the good news is the weather looks good for launch. Now, if for some reason we have to call a hold on today's launch, we have a backup opportunity scheduled tomorrow at the same time. All right, now we're waiting to hear the call out for Stage 2 LOX load complete.
Stage 2, lock load complete.
There we are. So we've closed out propellant loading on all stages. We're getting ready to begin what we call blowing down or purging the liquid oxygen propellants out of the strongback that we're going up to the second stage. And then we'll be venting down pressure in the strongback.
Started.
And you can see there's a stream of white vapor coming off of the strongback. That's normal. That's just the excess pressure in the ground side being vented out. And it's meeting that warm, humid Florida air. And you get that white condensation. Next event coming in 10 seconds is going to be startup. We'll also begin pressurizing the first and second stages for launch.
Falcon is in startup.
We've gone to startup. Flight computers on both stages are now running the Falcon 9 countdown. Next event, launch directors go.
LD, go for launch.
You've heard it. Launch directors given the go. Everything continues to look good. T-minus 36 seconds and counting. All systems are go for the launch of Falcon 9 with Turksat 5B.
T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. And liftoff.
Pitching downrange.
Stage 1 chamber pressure is nominal.
T plus 40 seconds, Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Slick 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, carrying the Turksat 5B satellite to geosynchronous transfer orbit. We've throttled down in preparation for maximum dynamic pressure. We're in the throttle bucket. Good views from the SpaceX ground cameras following the first stage.
Falcon is supersonic.
We've gone supersonic. The Merlin engines are back up to full power.
Max Q.
And we're through the period of maximum dynamic pressure. Everything continues to look good. Trajectory is nominal. Avionics report systems are nominal. "100 seconds into flight coming up in just under a minute. We're going to have main engine cutoff, where we shut off the 9 Merlin 1D engines. We'll separate the stages, and then the second stage engine will ignite at about the 2-minute and 44-second mark.
MVAC is chilling in.
The MVAC-D engine chill-in call-out. We've begun putting a little bit of liquid oxygen through the turbo pump to get it cold in preparation for second stage ignition. That's coming up in just about 34 seconds from now. First stage is coming up on 4G's acceleration, and we're going to begin throttling down to hold 4G's. Getting ready for main engine cutoff.
First stage engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC ignition.
We've got successful stage separation. The second stage now under power of the single Merlin vacuum engine. We'll be coming up on fairing deploy in a little under 30 seconds. Views of the titanium grid fins beginning to deploy on the left as we see the lights of Florida in the background as we head east, due east from the Cape into our transfer orbit parking orbit. We're getting ready for the camera on second stage to switch forward to look at the spacecraft and the payload fairing for fairing deploy.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And there you see, the two fairing halves have separated, falling away from the vehicle. We're now exposing the Turksat 5B satellite to outer space. As a reminder, we will be attempting to retrieve these two fairing halves with the help of our recovery vessel, Bob. Now, as mentioned previously, these two fairing halves supported the GPS-3 Space Vehicle 5 mission in June of this year. But right now, we're at T plus 4 minutes and counting. Everything continues to go well for the Falcon 9 mission, carrying Turksat 5B into the parking orbit.
As John mentioned, it's T plus 4 minutes and now 20 seconds into today's mission. We're currently in the first of 2 planned MVAC burns for satellite deployment. At T plus 6 minutes and 27 seconds, you should see on your screen the first stage is entry burn, a burn that lasts 24 seconds. For the entry burn, we relight the center engine E9, and then partway through, we relight E1 and E5 engines. So we have a total of 3 M1D engines helping to slow down the vehicle as it passes through the Earth's atmosphere. You'll see this exhaust start as a circular plume at the bottom from the single engine, then shape into a longer, narrower plume when the other two engines ignite. Reusability is a key to lowering the cost of spaceflight, which enables more investments in critical scientific research. The Falcon 9, that first stage that is supporting today's mission, will perform this entry burn for the 3rd time, having previously supported both the CRS-22 resupply flight to the ISS and the Crew 3 launch just last month. Great view on the right-hand side of the MVAC nozzle. The Merlins on the first stage are, with their short nozzles, are optimized for sea level. These achieve around 190,000 pounds of thrust during ascent and descent, while the MVAC engine with its extended nozzle is optimized for 220,000 pounds of thrust in vacuum. Now we're about 45 seconds away from the entry burn on the first stage. If you're just joining us, we had a successful launch from Slick 40 at Cape Canaveral, and we're currently watching the second stage on the right-hand side of your screen enter orbit. With the left-hand side of your screen, the first stage is heading back to our drone ship in the Atlantic, a short fall of gravitas. Let's watch out for that entry burn begin in just a moment.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
Stage 1 entry startup.
Really bright from that entry burn start.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
And there it looks like we've had a successful entry burn shutdown. If you noticed on the launch pad, the Falcon 9,
Trajectory is
when the
nominal.
Falcon 9 makes its way back to Earth, you may notice some different soot markings on the outer side, or the outer edges of the rocket. If you ever wondered how those soot markings are formed, it's because the soot is generated when the carbon-based rocket-grade kerosene RP1 burns. Since reentry occurs engines first, the booster flies through its own plume, which deposits the soot on the rocket, and you can see some of those sparks and soot flying up at the camera there on the left-hand side.
Terminal guidance.
Again, as a quick recap, we had a successful liftoff at 10:58 p.m. from Slick 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. A successful separation of the first and second stages. The first stage is on its way back to our drone ship, a short fall of gravitas in the Atlantic Ocean.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
And the second stage is heading to its initial orbital insertion with the Turksat 5B satellite. We're coming up on a couple events, SECO 1 and landing burn.
MVAC engine cutoff.
Stage 1 landing burn.
Had a successful second engine cutoff, and
Nominal orbit
the
insertion.
landing burn has just started. And we just heard good orbit. Confirmed a nominal orbital insertion. We're now
Stage
waiting on
1
our
landing
Falcon
leg
to
deploy.
land on drone ship, a short fall of gravitas.
Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And there you have it. That's SpaceX's 99th successful booster landing, as well as SpaceX's 78th mission flying a refuel and booster. Our mission isn't over just yet. The second stage is now embarking on its coast phase between the first and second burns of the MVAC-D engine. After the coast phase, we will light the MVAC engine for a second time, a little bit after T plus 26 minutes.
Expected loss of signal, Cape.
We'll see you back here in about 20 minutes at T plus 26 minutes. In the meantime, enjoy some space tunes.
Endeavor, SpaceX is go for deorbit, entry, and landing.
Copy, go for deorbit, entry, and landing. Good news.
And so again, we are providing continuous coverage of the Crew 2 return. We just heard the crew announce we are go for deorbit, entry, and landing. The SpaceX, or not SpaceX, the Crew 2 astronauts confirmed that. And so again, marching towards the 7:33 p.m. Pacific time splashdown, 10:33 p.m. Eastern time. Things continue to go great here, Gary. Yeah.
That's a significant milestone, Andy, because what it means is we are now really, the teams are ready to commit to the next couple of dynamic activities. A lot is going to happen once we get past 6 p.m. Pacific time. 6:09 p.m. Pacific, we're looking at the departure phase burn. Right now, we're pretty much co-elliptic with the International Space Station. That phase burn will turn us into a phasing that points us right towards the prime landing site, which we just heard that we're go for, which is off the coast of Pensacola, Florida. That's a 42-second burn, and it puts us really in line with that. It's not too long after that where we'll see the Dragon slew for claw separation and trunk separation. The trunk will go off into the distance and burn up in the atmosphere. In the meantime, the Dragon will reorient itself, putting the heat shield right towards the atmosphere of the Earth, where it will do the bulk of the work of slowing the vehicle down from 17,500 miles per hour to 350 miles per hour. That, of course, in order to get to that point, we need to conduct a 16.5-minute deorbit burn, and that really is what commits us to landing off the coast of Pensacola, Florida. Even at this point, the teams could, even after the phasing burn, look for other opportunities. But with that go, it means that we are very likely going to head towards that deorbit burn here coming up not too long from now.
Yeah, and we heard about 30 minutes ago that weather, sea states also looked great, and that definitely was taken into account before giving the go. So yeah, the astronauts, I'm sure, are ready to go home. And on screen right now, we have a view of them looking at their display monitors. Again, they have access to a lot of information of the vehicle that they can use and refer to for re-entry.
So you see the display is looking at the ground track. They have a full map of the Earth, and they're looking at their relative position as they orbit the Earth, which is, at this time, still co-elliptic with the International Space Station. We'll be getting to that point very shortly where we line up with the prime landing site. Flanking on each of the screens that were on both of the sides, each respective of the commander and the pilot was an outlay of where the Draco thrusters were. So they are able to see the Draco thrusters firing, making sure that they're doing their job with that 42-second burn that's coming up here in just about 12 minutes.
After the departure phasing burn, we have one more burn left. You mentioned it. It's the 16-minute deorbit burn. And then Dragon, once it enters the Earth's atmosphere, there's going to be a communication blackout period for about 7 minutes. What that means is the crew in Dragon cannot communicate to the ground, and the ground cannot communicate to Dragon. There is some interference from the plasma that's built up around the exterior of Dragon. But at this point, the Dragon vehicle itself is really piloting itself. It knows exactly where it's at and knows exactly where it wants to go. So it will continue to steer the crew towards the primary landing site. while we, again, go through that period of high plasma and get to the other side and we can get comms up again.
After we have an acquisition of signal on the other side of that entry, we'll be able to hear some of the first words from the crew as they are inside the atmosphere of planet Earth. The deployment of parachutes will happen relatively quickly. What's scheduled right now is the drogue parachutes to deploy. That will take roughly 8 seconds, and then about 40 seconds after that, the drogue parachutes will be released and the 4 main parachutes will be deployed. That sequence slows the vehicle down from roughly 350 miles per hour to about 15 miles per hour. Nice and gentle, so the crew, when they land in the ocean, is a nice soft landing.
And this here is a view of Mission Control Hawthorne. Teams here are continuing to support the crew to return. And again, a few minutes away from that departure phasing burn.
The teams here handed over to a new shift. There was a shift of flight controllers that looked over the undocking phase as well as the fly around and the exit of the approach ellipsoid, all of which was under joint operations with the teams over in Mission Control Houston. And then in between that, they handed over to a new shift. These flight controllers are overseeing the phase of flight that we're in right now, which is coming up to be, like as we're saying, Andy, is a very critical time with the phase burn. We're going to be separating the Dragon trunk, committing to a deorbit burn and landing off the coast of Florida. Again, we heard a go for deorbit burn entry and landing. That means that the vehicle is healthy, the crew is prepared, the recovery teams are in position, and the weather out in Pensacola, Florida is cooperating. This is one of the reasons why we are doing this indirect handover, is for this moment. The Crew 2 astronauts undocked before the Crew 3 astronauts launched to the International Space Station, primarily because the weather that was predicted for tonight's landing was predicted to be very, very favorable. And we're hearing reports that that is true, that the sea states are very calm. The wind speeds are also calm, not exceeding 5 knots. The recovery teams are already out there, and we're aiming for our prime splashdown location off of the coast of Pensacola, Florida.
Yeah, the Corps described it as lake-like, which
right.
is about the best thing you can hear if you're an astronaut coming home. There are a couple things that they look at. So the wave height is important, as well as the period of the waves, or how often the waves are crashing. So again, green on all accounts, really, in terms of sea state and weather, which is great and excellent news.
So we're just about 8 minutes away from that departure phase burn. It's not too long of a burn, about 42 seconds.
On screen right now is a view inside the cabin. The arm, or the hand at the middle of the screen, that is Thomas Pesquet's hand of the European Space Agency. You can see that on his, I believe that's his left thigh, there's a tablet. That is where all of their procedures and instructions and manuals that they can refer to, it's all housed there. And so we heard the Corps and the crew talking to each other about certain procedures and steps. They're referring to that inside their tablets to make sure that, again, all of the things that need to be done and all of the procedures that need to be accounted for, they're all done when they need to be
This
done.
view is spectacular right now, just beyond where you see Commander Sheen Kimbrough and pilot Megan MacArthur. Just beyond the pilot, you can see 2 patches that are 2